Now I want to welcome the guests for our Driving Innovation in Marketing panel. Our first guest is Emily, my eyesight is not good enough to read from here, Emily Cagwin, and I will actually be able to read without glasses from this vantage point. Welcome from Harvard Business School Executive Education. And we have Neil Bearse from Queen's School in Canada. And Michael Schinelli, who is CMO at UNC Kenan-Flagler School of Business. So welcome. And again, what we're seeing that we think is panel worthy is that marketing is taking on a lot more responsibility than it ever once has. It's taking on massive innovation in technology, solving problems, and also taking into control more of the student life cycle than it ever has before. And really leading change within schools. And we've invited you guys especially because we've seen aspects of those innovative things going on that are really at the cutting edge of higher ed. I'd love to hear from your experience, Emily, if you want to start off what you're seeing at HBS within exec ed and how you've seen the differentiating really coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a couple of things that come to mind for me in terms of how our role has been expanding and why it's been expanding. One thing that I can think of is, what started as part of our marketing team as a marketing analytics group that really focused on helping us figure out whether or not our media efforts were delivering on their KPIs has really expanded into just analytics of everything that we're doing collectively as an executive education team. So people in, program directors can come to us and say, what can you tell us about which programs, which open enrollment executive education programs are good feeder programs for our flagship alumni granting executive education programs? And so the fact that we're kind of the source for those answers and guidance has really helped us be more involved with the broader team. The other thing I would say too is that as we move to start automating more of our email marketing communications, it has allowed us to take on work that we weren't previously able to. So an example of that, we accept applicants on a rolling basis. And so there's someone who may be admitted to a program and it's months before they're going to be on campus with us. And today, this is a project that's on our roadmap, but today there can often be a long lag between when they get that acceptance letter and then when they're actually coming to one of our executive education programs. Today, it's the program delivery team who picks that up and runs with that pre-program communication flow. But we have the opportunity to take that, move it to Marketing Cloud, which is our marketing automation platform, and really just look at, okay, I see someone who's going to be here 6 months from now. We don't want to go silent in terms of program communication and have their enthusiasm wane and potentially lose them if they withdraw from the program, and really just have that as kind of a new and separate nurture campaign. And before, we just didn't have the bandwidth to take things on like that.
Yeah. And similarly, Michael, I know we've talked a lot about UNC's cutting-edge connected school view of the world. Could you give us a little bit of an overview about how you've approached transforming that school?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really become evident over the last few years is that the role of marketing is so important because it's one of the few parts of the organization that really is at that intersection of consumer behavior, interacting with the customer, and all the technological change that's happened over the last few years. Where that's sort of been implemented on our side is thinking about enterprise approaches to what is naturally a fairly siloed industry, a fairly siloed ecosystem within higher education, and looking for the best practice platforms, whether that's the third-party platforms or analytics platforms or communications platforms, working with IT, working with program staff when possible, but really looking out to the ecosystem that's enabled so many other sectors in the last decade to make this digital transformation. So being that kind of strategic partner and strategic leader, but also remembering that marketing is a service organization within schools like ours, and you're gonna be talking about leading big initiatives like marketing automation, and you're going to be doing PDFs for that faculty member who runs into your team's office at Friday afternoon or something, and we have to be good at both of those things. But the emphasis on the strategy and the big picture is definitely come into focus much more.
Yeah. And Neil, if you don't mind, I know you come from a somewhat non-traditional background as well, and are somewhat bringing that to the higher ed digital marketing space.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to look outside of higher education to see what other big brands are doing and how people are having to navigate mobile and social and trying to get information to fit nicely within a news feed, LinkedIn, Facebook, or otherwise. And you look at our marketing team, and we have communications, marketing and communications in our title. And communications has typically been thought of as PR and working with the media. But now we're hearing things from our Career Advancement Center coming to us and saying, we're running a resume workshop. Can you please run targeted ads against our commerce students to make sure that they sign up because they don't read email anymore? So everything is coming back towards marketing, even towards your current students, let alone trying to re-engage them when they're alumni. It's trying to re-engage them at 5 o'clock when they were in class at 1 p.m. that day.
So how have you handled this level of challenge? I mean, it's almost as if you're the go-to for sort of all things communication and social and technology in sort of how to transform an institution to be more relevant in a lot of these students and prospects' lives. How have you approached sort of getting your team up to speed and yourselves too?
It's hard. I'll jump in. I think it's a matter of hiring the right people, making sure that you're really strict in your hiring process and saying yes to the right candidates and saying no to the people that you think are just showing up to do the job that they're actually applying for. Because our department has morphed and changed so much over the last 3 years. It's finding people that want to try new things and break stuff in the process. And also, especially within the higher education space, finding people who will take a great idea, take it to a meeting, and then deal with that initial resistance, work through that initial resistance for 6 to 8 months, find the way to have the small little skunkworks project that suddenly catches fire and someone else gets excited about it. And really just make sure that you have people in your team that are willing to do stuff differently 2 years from now than you ever thought would be part of their job description.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can. Oh, you go ahead, Michael.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I can definitely relate to that. I think that the people that our marketing team is comprised of look so different than they would have even 4 or 5 years ago. On my team, I have someone in-house who is coding all of our emails, who has design skills, who it allows us to just be that much more agile and nimble. But then at the same time, I also think I have to myself be someone who's willing to change and grow and just kind of make things happen. If you have an idea that you want to bring to life, I mean, when I first started at Harvard Business School about 3 years ago, there were very clear lanes, roles, and responsibilities between what IT did and what marketing did, and then we migrated from an old, clunky email marketing platform to Marketing Cloud, and now all of a sudden there's so much we can do if we're willing to do it. So now I'm writing SQL queries. I mean, these are things that I never thought that I would be doing as a marketing person, but it empowers us to do so much more than we could if we were always, waiting for other people to fit us into their workflow. And so I think kind of being an example of that willingness to change and willing to grow and learn new skills can spread to other people on your team as well.
Oh.
Yeah, I think making sure that you're able to add value and demonstrate that value even in small projects and gain that trust, particularly when you're leading change like this. And a lot of that change is based on technologies that people aren't used to, they might be a little bit afraid of or intimidated by. And so demonstrating that value, I think, is really important, making sure people understand the vision, how you're going to measure it, and most importantly, how it links back, how it ladders back up to the objectives of that organization. If it's an admissions unit, how does this actually directly tie in to lower in the funnel? If it's a if it's a fundraising or an advancement team initiative, how are you going to increase engagement rate? How are you going to increase donor activity, or ultimately dollars, and making sure they have that buy-in and that expectation up front, and then they're willing to kind of give you a little bit more opportunity to demonstrate.
Yeah. And when you talk about kind of the interesting skunkworks projects that you go out and prove, what are some that sort of have worked and not worked, to give us some ideas about what it's like behind closed doors?
I got to think for a minute on that one.
Okay.
You were the one with the skunk works
Yeah,
project.
to be honest, and it's not at all because this is a LinkedIn event. A lot of the LinkedIn product innovations that have come along, lead gen forms is a great example. We were challenged, so we're based in Kingston, Ontario. We have programs offered across the country, but we were running an information session in downtown San Francisco, and we were challenged with, can you fill a room with 30 people who are interested in coming to Canada to get an MBA? And if we'd gone about it the traditional way of, we got to drive people to the website, we got to get them to fill out forms, it's going to cost X amount in cost per click. We just said, what if we just throw lead gen ads out there as a prospecting tool? In terms of what worked, we got a heck of a lot of leads. People filled out the forms. What didn't work is our entire internal process was broken. Because we sort of didn't tell them we were doing it. And so these leads were going into Salesforce. They're beautiful. They're all still sitting there. They're all equally qualified and engaged, but the follow-up process wasn't yet in place. Yep. And so they didn't get the follow-up the next day of saying, hi, we're Smith School of Business. You've never heard of us before. We met for 30 seconds yesterday on LinkedIn. Right. And there was no nurture to follow up with. So 3 weeks later, the people didn't show up for the event. But now, because we've shown this proof of concept of this works as a prospecting tool, now we've got 30 leads. How do we increase the rate of people who show up? People will come to that meeting. Yeah. But if you just said, hey, I've got this wild idea of something we've never done before, it's so easy for people to say, well, why don't we just try that thing that we did last year? Yeah. So we try new things, and like I said, we break stuff, and then you bring a bunch of people together to come fix it.
Yeah, and it brings up another point, and I apologize. I'll if you've got another one, I'd love to hear too. Just about kind of how many of these pieces move at different rates. So you sort of you accelerate one piece like the lead gen, and then oh my god, the nurture cycle and all the other, and the technology and the attribution sort of has to play catch up, and they're sort of never exactly equally at that same place. Did you have an example of a project that you tried and failed or
everything we do is nothing ever.
I'd love to hear another example.
Well, we've also tried to, like I was saying before, map things over, translate things from the marketing and the lead generation, enrollment marketing over to the campaign. The university just announced its capital campaign a couple weeks ago, and we've been hard at work at that for the last year and a half, and all the new things that need to happen in a capital campaign. I often say no university's really ever had a digital capital campaign, and every campaign they have next will be a digital capital campaign, just because of the nature of the consumer behavior and the technology and all the platforms. So we've done some things that were really successful and were unexpected, like we remarketed to our alumni for a giving day. So we sent a newsletter that we normally would be sending to all our alumni, except we pixeled it and we put a banner campaign against it 2 weeks before the 24-hour giving day to kind of keep it on their radar. So when they're checking the weather or buying shoes or doing whatever, we're there. And then in the 24-hour period, we changed the creative and drove everyone to the campaign site. And so that's sort of a successful thing. And then there's I guess there's always challenges with alumni lists. There's so many holes, and there's so many. Somebody was speaking earlier about if you have 50 or 60 or 70% of your alumni's emails, you're probably ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. So we've tried to do things again in an enterprise way that leverages communications for announcements, whether it was converting our magazine over to apps. And what you have to do, because some of those things are going to fail, because there's holes, is try to be redundant, try to at least bridge the gap. And so you do some print to tell people that you're going to be taking the print away, and meanwhile you're sending emails to about half of the database telling them that we know you're in this channel. So there's a little bit of a disparate approach sometimes that's needed, but it ends up working out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the challenges, ironically to me, is there's so much tracking that goes on in digital that when it's not perfect, we get sort of frustrated and we sort of then put more in other channels in some cases. I mean, I'm still in conversations comparing print ROI to TV and out of home to digital, and the level of the level of accuracy and the expectations associated with digital so far outweigh those with other channels still, which is quite ironic. But are you having success with different means of attribution, and even going into kind of what software you're using and how you've integrated with the other systems? I'd love to hear sort of specifically what you're doing that's working for you.
So, like most people here, we've kind of found ourselves in the situation where you're not just managing 5 or 6 platforms and 5 or 6 data feeds. You have dozens of them, all your owned properties, your third party, your organic, and your paid media, and all the things that we're doing have these data sets, and they're not apples to apples, and we get them on spreadsheets, we get them in reports, sometimes we have dashboards we could go to. And so we made a decision a couple years ago to move towards an internal ad server, and we implemented that within this last year. We're about 8 months to being fully running on that platform, on a DCM platform, and what that effectively means is that we're serving the creative directly from our server. So when that server, when a website pings our server and a creative gets served, we have all that first party data. That's great, but most importantly is all that data comes in and it's all apples to apples. It's all in one system, it's all in the same language, it's all real time. And we can tag things with UTM codes or floodlight tags further down in Slate, in our admissions funnel, or in even press releases. So it was a big move, and it was something that we felt we really wanted to bite the bullet and do that. And it's enabling us now to look at attribution and not just get into the I think what Google would love us to do is just look at Google Analytics and say last touch attribution, search ads win all the time, keep spending more money. When in fact, once you start to see how these things interplay and all the assisted conversions that comes with seeing that first party data, it's a really interesting story. So we just made that switch, and it took, to your point, creating a role for someone to be a marketing analyst, creating partnerships, and going to all our partners and saying, we still want to work with you, but it's going to be a new way.
Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, from a digital media attribution standpoint, we have a great agency partner. Wavemaker is their new name, formerly Maxis. So we have been working with them because I feel like, over the course of, we've had a great 4+ year relationship now. We really have, through kind of internal pressures, probably over-rotated towards that last touch attribution model. And so we've really been partnering with them to figure out how we can get a better sense of what are the tactics that are working to really raise awareness and bring people into the upper funnel, because we know what to do with them from there. But we don't want to, dry out our retargeting pool, depend solely on, we're seeing great results from paid search. Well, those people were already considering us. They were almost there anyway. For us, what we're really focused on as executive education marketing is net new quality applications. So a lot of our participants do come from referrals. We have repeat participants. So where we can really add value as a team is those brand new people coming in and experiencing our programs. We're also using Adobe Analytics to give us that campaign stack view, and are starting to take Adobe Analytics data and actually upload it into Salesforce. We're able to, when an application is submitted, the unique contact ID of that person or the unique application ID of that person is passed back to Adobe, and then we can take all that raw data and put it into Salesforce and stamp it on the application record, and then that lets us pull interesting reports that show all of the different ways that individual interacted with us. So anything that we can do to move beyond that last touch attribution has really started to benefit us and just help us figure out, what is the right media mix for us. And we don't have to be afraid of doing some things that aren't measurable at all, as long as they kind of round out what we're seeing our client services team receive in terms of opportunities and qualified prospects. That's another approach we've taken, is to say, how robust is the opportunity pool that our client services team is actively working?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, it's a pretty same story. Google Analytics for years has been great at showing us the how many. How many pennies are in that jar in terms of conversion. And luckily, I've got a colleague in our MBA recruiting team who's always held our feet to the fire. For a while, we ran ads on monster.com thinking, here's a great place where people are looking for jobs. What we didn't realize, these are unemployed people looking for jobs, right? And LinkedIn's been a nice addition to that. And we drive a heck of a lot of unqualified leads to her. And so she'd come around running in and saying, turn that off. And she was the barometer of how the quality and the who were coming in. And now what we've really transitioned to is Google Analytics is fine for the overall aggregate bounce rate, that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to actually trying to drive business development contacts and personal relationships, we've moved more towards using Pardot to track a lot of the behavioral data. So once someone comes in, they're an unidentified visitor, and then all of a sudden we get that lead information, and it all of a sudden says, aha, okay, you're Michael. You've been to the website 75 times over the last 6 months. You've interacted with this campaign, this campaign, this campaign. And we're working with integrations with WebEx to track, have you attended this webinar before? And if you have, we're going to take you out of that nurture cycle and put you in something else. So we're really getting to that point where we can see that we're getting the right people, and it's a true reflection of the fact that if you're selling a $10,000 exec ed program or a $130,000 MBA, there's no such thing as a shopping cart experience. So they're going to be bouncing back and forth between us and the universe for the next 2 years. If we can get a better picture of that, it arms our sales team with the information they need to have that kind of destiny moment where the phone rings and, hey, guess what? You don't have to know that we know you were on our website 37 times in the last week, but we're going to have this nice phone.
Them out too much.
Yeah, we're going to have this nice warm conversation about maybe today's the day. Yeah. So we're getting there. It's hard, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and speaking of kind of finding the right applicants, we're hearing a lot about adult learners and online learners and, more flexibility in programs. Is that an area that you guys have been experimenting with, and has the definition of the right applicant changed as well?
Yeah, this has changed a lot for us. So our programs are typically targeted to pretty senior level executives, but that has changed a lot in the past 5-10 years. Particularly in the technology industry, there are people who have far fewer years of experience but are holding very senior roles. And so it does help that we have, there is a human touch in terms of how we pre-qualify leads that come in. If we were just, automatically nixing anyone who was 5 years or less, probably more accurately 8 years or less, something like that, then we might be missing out on people who could be a good fit for a particular program, for sure.
Yeah, I think Jeff Salingo earlier was talking, I don't remember the exact phrase, but he said something like, what the first rule is to sort of undo the architecture of how you sort of thought about things in the past, this infrastructure, right? And one of the takeaways, I think, from online programs, we have an online MBA and an online Master of Accounting program, is that we have 6 MBA programs, and 3 of them are executive MBAs, and we have these nice, neat packages of evening, weekend, and global. And when you start dealing with the online population, you realize it's that full spectrum plus the full-time people that are really of the age group and experience level, but have other factors that make them an online student. So you have this whole category of working professionals, but that actually connects back to all of our other programs, all our other segments. So it does redefine in that regard how you have to segment within a segment and understand how even you have to be distinctive within your programs even more carefully so that you don't end up cannibalizing or mixing things up even more.
Yeah.
Definitely complicates things.
Yeah, we don't have a true traditional, where you would think of it in terms of an online play, but our MBA programs are offered, while you work in whatever market via video conferencing, and I think it's just important in everything that we do that we talk about flexibility, and when you talk about flexibility, it can't be this generic high-level flexibility, just flexibility TM, because everything is flexible right now. Everything's organic. Everything is custom, handmade. Right? When it's at that high level, people don't get it. But when you can understand the segment that you're talking to and truly get that persona, you're talking about our entrepreneurship master's program that we have, and really sell that person on the idea that you can build a company while you take this program. You have to put the time in to make the creative to work, because if you throw bad creative at the best audience that you could possibly have, it's so easy to throw it out and say, well, that audience didn't work. Let's try our bad creative against another great audience. And so to take the time to really, they're hard conversations to have, or to pin down a program director and a recruitment person and an application advisor to say, let's just unpack the last 10 really star graduates you've had. What are they most scared of in the world? And let's figure this out together. And when you can really communicate that, it works.
Yeah. And do you leverage alums in some ways in your marketing? And how are you managing to do that at this point?
I'll start. At the highest level, the standard testimonial that, kind of everywhere, I think over time people become a little bit blind to them when presented in that format. So we're doing a great job, I think, at making sure that when, I think typically, websites were built to be this kind of like a digital version of a brochure, and then information sessions where we're going to kind of read you our website with the PowerPoint slide behind me. Yeah. Now we're shifting more towards understanding that people are showing up to these types of sessions. They've done their research. They've got your PDF. They've read everything they can possibly read about you. So now, how do we make that in-person experience or that WebEx experience more of an informal conversation with someone who's been there and been through it and come out the other side with a really great job? So we're doing a little bit more of letting our digital assets do that easy upfront informational work, and letting alumni do the personal relationship building part, with the program director really stepping back and saying, I don't know, listen to her. She'll tell you how great it was.
Perfect. Yeah, building on that, we've also tried to create event experiences that enable alumni to bring people in their network to have kind of a mini experience with a faculty member where they're able to, either hear from the faculty about the program or some research, or even better, have a mini case discussion so that they really get a sense of what it's like to be in a program.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we all realize and that we've seen in every kind of sector is that the brand doesn't really own the communication anymore, right? And the flip side, the benefit of that is that the users, your customers, and particularly in a peer-to-peer kind of way, current students and recent alumni are so credible, and they're seen as so much more credible than anything that is in your brochure or website or on a PowerPoint slide. So putting those personal narratives and that increased credibility to work is really, we found to be really powerful. We've done that through videos, and we've even done, we have a number of apps at the business school, and one of them is the leadership app, where we sort of showcase the leadership program model and a number of other types of content. And we use 5 different students as real personas that have had tremendous amount of experience, a little bit of experience, maybe more technical background, and 0 experience on leadership. And how did each of them literally navigate the leadership development journey at the school with this huge array of things that you can choose from? And so that personal narrative and letting the students in video and in sort of a checklist format identify the route they took allows someone to come in and say, I'm kind of like her, and so what did she do? Yeah. And compare that to someone else. And we're not doing the talking. Like you guys saying, we're letting them do the talking for us.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about that at LinkedIn, that's sort of thinking about every staff member's LinkedIn page as a potential door or a first door that a prospective student might see, and sort of how do you want that door to look, and think of it as a marketing material too. I just wanted to circle back in our last few minutes on nurture cycles, because that sort of seems to be one of the few parts of our industry that's lagging a little bit behind all the innovation we're seeing in the other elements. And you mentioned still picking up the phone and that working. Are you seeing other areas that are working that maybe matching sort of some of the immediacy of the technology and the tracking?
Yeah, so the way that lead nurturing works for us is someone comes into the site, they request more information about a program, and then they are put into a workflow where we actually have a small team of 3 part-time remote workers who are kind of going through those leads, checking their LinkedIn profiles, seeing if they're really qualified for the program that they're interested in, and then kind of designating, yes, they're qualified, or they're qualified but really more appropriate for another program, they're not qualified at all. And then from there, there's really an automated campaign that goes out based on how they were designated in the system. Right now, that campaign is really driven through our client services team. So if someone has specifically requested information about a program and we do feel they're qualified, they're immediately getting outreach from one of our program advisors. It's automated. That shares more information about the program, encourages them to connect with them by phone or email, or set up an appointment at a convenient time so that they can really talk through, what is the challenge or goal that they're trying to meet in attending a program. And that series goes out in the hopes that you will trigger that call or, the human response, and from there, our program advisors pick it up and run with it.
So we use HubSpot for the marketing automation part of that, for all our programs. To use the full-time MBA as an example, because of the scale, we can't reach out and touch as many as nearly as many as the people that will inquire to the program. So we have the kind of pre-built set of automated marketing workflows that, in theory, everyone would get, and then what we do is really integrate that with a couple other aspects. One is the degree to which someone has had a lead scoring number, basically a rating. So we'll do lead scoring based on what behavioral activity they might have done on our website. Did they download this? Did they come to this particular page? Did they RSVP for an event? Did they show up for that event? Whatever. So they have some scoring that factors into the leads into HubSpot. And then the other way that we kind of slice and dice that is that we'll accelerate that whole stack of communications and even remove some of them depending on how close we are to a deadline for the program. So there's sort of the generic version that some people get, but a lot of people get these more customized views and more compressed views depending on how many weeks they are out from one of the full-time deadlines.
Really cool. Yeah, we have a team within our master's and MBA programs that I personally don't know how they get through the volume of personal one-on-one follow-up that they do. Wow. They love their jobs and they come to work and they say, bring it on, we want more. And so I think a lot of our nurture that really matters for us is that personal one-on-one thing. We're reaching a point now where it may not be scalable. Again, we don't have sort of the volume of an online offering in a lot of our programs, so we can still do that. Yeah. But we do have a number of different, find your perfect program type quizzes on our site, which it's a really beautiful high funnel conversion point. It doesn't require anyone to offer up any information. It allows them to feel like they're a little bit in control, answering a few questions. We take their answers to the question, years of management experience that's helping ultimately spit out 1 or 2 programs that they should pursue further. And we use a lot of that to do remarketing campaigns. So while a lot of when they are in the funnel is driven by either a recruitment advisor, an application advisor, or a program director, what we're doing at the very highest level of the funnel is remarketing them to try to pull them back in with more and more and more specific material based on how much we know about them.
Yeah, and it does seem like it's sort of that human personalized touch complemented by a little bit more automation to sort of sort and move people through. Are you seeing that the actual length of the nurture cycle has changed at all, or just the components maybe over time?
I think it's still a fairly long process that it takes a lot of people buying into an idea before they realize that it's working or not. So that cycle hasn't necessarily changed for us. There certainly are other competitors, especially in the exec ed space, that are disrupting us from different angles. But it's important to keep in mind that for that individual, their decision cycle might still be 2 to 3 years for an MBA program. So when we do try something new, to not give up on it on day 70, because we don't all of a sudden have this influx of 100 new apps. So we're going to see that come in. So how do you figure out what are the earlier predicting signs of success? But I don't think I've seen it compress in any way.
Yeah, even for our short programs, which are 5 days, so that's all of our short open enrollment programs are somewhere between 3 and 5 days, and then we have 4 flagship programs that are somewhere between 7 and 8 weeks. So it's different depending on which program type. But we also look at, okay, from the time somebody becomes an opportunity, so a very warm lead, to the time they actually submit an application, that time can even be 90 days plus. So the time between when they're first engaging with us or visiting the website and then actually become someone who is actively likely going to submit an application, it can be anywhere from 3 months to a year, to be honest.
Yeah, I would echo that. I don't think we've seen a compression. The thing I worry about more is actually that the choice set is being formed so far out. It's not necessarily that they're not continuing to do research or start their research a year or 18 months out. It's that they start their research 18 months out and they have 3 to 5 schools that they're only going to be thinking about for the next 18 months. So it's, you got to sort of figure out how do you reach those people way, way, way up there in the funnel, but in order to get into that choice set, and then also hang on for 18 months, right? Engage with them and ultimately convince them to apply and enroll.
Makes sense. So in our last minute or so-ish, could you give us some advice? You're all in sort of very historic institutions with that can be sort of the hardest to bring innovation to. There's a lot of brand name and history to protect. If you were going to give advice at driving innovation in any organization, but especially these types, what would you say?
I think from personal experience, the biggest ideas that have resonated the most is when you somehow find a way to trick people or convince people into thinking that it wasn't marketing's idea. Like,
can write that one down.
If the idea comes from somewhere else, you seed the idea and be happy when someone else steals your idea and brings it back to you. They always want to do it then. So that's my strategy.
Yeah, I guess a similar example is, I think a lot of the efficiencies and the big ideas that are available out there that can really bring a lot of change are the things that are connecting dots in these types of institutions, the things that are bridging the silos, that are solving for more than one unit, and yet no unit is going to look at anything from that perspective and get really excited. So you almost have to be having these separate conversations for a certain amount of time until you have each of those individual units seeing a clear benefit to them, and then you kind of reveal, well, you know what, this could work for all of us, couldn't it? And maybe there's a lot of efficiencies, and maybe there's a lot of data, and maybe there's a lot of benefit to taking an enterprise approach. Whereas if you go out and say, I have the solution for everyone, they're all afraid of it because they all think they're unicorns. Yeah. They're not.
Yeah.
And then for me, I found just building trust. So saying, yes to people on my team when they ask me to try something or do something, even when I don't necessarily know how it's going to pan out or exactly why we're doing it. Same goes for colleagues from other departments within executive education. We're now working a lot more with our partners around HBS that offer, different products like HBX, which is our online learning platform. So really just being willing to say yes and help out anyone who comes to ask for help, faculty, of course, whenever they do, because then you get that reciprocity. When you have something that you want to try and it's not, maybe you don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, but you have reason to believe that it will be valid, people are more likely to say yes to you.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.